Hey, what's going on, everybody? First and foremost, go Birds. Sirianni's got to go. I don't care if we win the Super Bowl, he out. But let's just get into it today. It is the day before Election Day, and I felt like I just wanted to have one last kind of message in closing, in that some of the reasons that I've heard that there are certain people that are voting for Trump are specifically because of immigration and the economy. Those are kind of the two larger issues. And even if there's some smaller issues, it kind of ropes in there. I mean, of course, you have like pro-life in there, but that's actually like kind of smaller from what I've heard. But I just figured I want to kind of tackle these things independently to just find out whether you actually really do support, him in those endeavors. Because I feel like a lot of people, they oversimplify some of the things that he wants to do and don't really know the true impact. Kind of similar to the video that I had previously about, the symptoms versus the true root cause, and like what some of these solutions, if we are opposing them, will actually do. And I think him scapegoating immigrants is one of the large things. And then I'll tackle the economy later, but let's just get into it. So, I mean, let's just talk about immigration on its face. And I'm going to just talk about it primarily from an economic standpoint. So I'm going to bypass the moral argument. If you're a Christian, I'm going to bypass the fact that Jesus and the Bible is very specific about how you should treat your neighbor, about how you should treat even your enemy. Right? You know what I'm saying? The fact that Jesus himself was a refugee. You know what I'm saying? The fact that the Statue of Liberty like literally says to give us your tired, your poor, your things of that nature, given that many of the white people in this nation were from poor European immigrants that at some point were discriminated against and scapegoated as well before they entered to this country. But I'm just going to bypass all the hypocrisy and the moral fraudulence of all of that argument and go straight to the economics and suggest, okay, most people are saying that they don't want immigrants here because they believe they're criminals, right? They believe they're like stealing our benefits and our tax dollars. They're stealing our jobs and they're depressing our wages. And I'm actually going to give some lip service to some of those arguments, but kind of like show just some facts in contrast to it. One, I mean, of course, whenever you have more people, you're going to have crime, right? Like crime is something that like naturally happens. But if you're going to talk about percentages of people who actually perform crimes, immigrants perform crimes at a much lower clip. You know what I'm saying? Like at a much, much, much lower clip than at rate rather than other demographics. So if crime is really your concern, you might want to have more immigrants in here because they do less crime than natural born citizens. Stealing of benefits. I mean, I think we should know that most immigrants don't get benefits because that's a right of citizenship, right? So it's just kind of a false narrative. Now, granted, there may be some money that we have for immigrants that maybe hit some emergent services and things of that nature. But if you look at the dollar for what a U.S. citizen gets versus what an immigrant gets, it's like pales in comparison. It's like it's negligible. Stealing jobs, I would offer the fact that no one can steal a job. Jobs are given by employers, and it's employers that are giving these immigrants jobs, and sometimes even getting them, incentivizing them to come over and take these jobs, and also offering them way lower wages for these jobs. So if you do have a problem with that, maybe you should talk to the employer that's hiring them, and then lowering the wages. Again, that's an employer issue that's choosing to say like, hey, these people I'm going to pay them less for the same job. Even if they're illegal, why should you pay them less, right? They're exploiting that purchase. So it's like the lowering of wages, again, is a employer thing and not necessarily something for immigrants. But, but even if you don't believe any of those logical explanations that I posed for some of those arguments, let's go to some of the pros of immigration, right? Because everything's just not just bad. And I feel like that's what they do. They try and polarize the other argument to being good versus evil. But no, there's some pros to immigration I think everyone can admit to, is that immigrants are taxpayers, right? They pay taxes on everything here, just like we all do. I mean, granted, like in some illegal work situations, they might not pay income tax, but like there's a tax, there's sales tax, you know what I'm saying? Like there's like, I mean, I can't think of many taxes, but there's so many taxes we know that we all pay with just going through day-to-day purchases, like state tax on items and different things. So they are a tax base here in America. They also are consumers, right? They buy stuff from businesses just like anybody else. You know what I'm saying? So they definitely yield consumer money for us and help the economy. And additionally, they are a source of cheap labor, right? So you might complain they're cheap labor, but businesses sure love using them, right? To the point where they're hiring and bringing them to the country and incentivizing them to come in. I mean, why do immigrants come here? I would almost venture to say that, like, hey, if employers said, we are not hiring you anymore, immigration would probably go away overnight, right? So let's like put it where it is. So, but now we have some of the pros and we have some of the cons. So let's actually go to some of the impact of like, if immigrants were gone all of a sudden today, what do you think would happen? What do you think would happen? So let's just right into it. So one, it will be higher costs because of labor shortages. Immigrants make up between 10 and 20% of the labor force in certain industries. So just imagine if that just disappeared overnight, right? And they were the cheap labor source, right? And if you've run a business, you know that hiring and firing and training and onboarding, all those things are the most expensive and time consuming portions of the business. You know what I'm saying? So like you as a business owner losing your staff and then your staff that's costing you the least amount of money is almost like a death wish. Haven't we been at stores that have closed because like, hey, someone called out, so we don't have enough staff here? Haven't we experienced that there's so many staff shortages? Aren't there so many lines, that we have when we're consumers because of that? Imagine if 20% of that workforce was gone. Right? Then we will have higher product costs because of product shortages. If you have less immigrant workers to, just say something, work in factories or pick agriculture and things of that nature, what do you think will happen? Prices are going to increase because the supply is going to go down because there won't be enough people to do the work. So immediately you're going to have price increases that are drastic. And it's happened. We've seen this, right? And you can even look at COVID as kind of like a mirror of what would happen during this. Because in COVID, we acknowledged that the supply side was going down. There was a global, shortage of labor. People were staying inside and things of that nature. So what did we take from that, right? We took from that like we accepted higher prices, across the board for everything, and don't think that won't happen if we do this with immigrants, right? The exact same shit will happen, right? Additionally, you'll have a higher cost to businesses, like I said before. So you are increasing their labor expenses. So what does that mean? They might not even be able to stay in business, let alone they might be fortunate enough to raise prices, but they might not be able to afford that right now, right? Also, we would lose a lot of purchase power. America's economy is driven on consumerism, right? Our economy is the envy of the world because somehow we've still managed to spend money. If we've now taken 20% of the maximum of the purchasing power away from immigrants who are buying things here, what's going to happen to our economy, right? We're going to have a shrinking economy just based on that, right? In addition to the loss of tax income, because they might not pay the income taxes if their employers are cheating them, but they pay taxes on everything else from everything that they purchase in this country. So I would venture to say that if you are complaining about raising prices and raising costs, getting rid of immigrants immediately without a real plan is literally the worst thing that you could do. It's literally the worst thing you could do, right? And I'm going to just move forward really quickly and go to tariffs. In case you don't know what a tariff is basically a tax on imported goods. You know what I'm saying? Like, so tax from a good that's from a foreign country like China. We're going to charge you an extra 20%, which is what Trump is posing on the said good. So if you're thinking about it like maybe in layman's terms, it's like it might be good to you. It's like, okay, well, we're charging money for foreign people's products. So like that will maybe encourage people to buy, American produced products, and that'll help. But let me just tell you that if you look at most economists and how tariffs have been utilized in the past, they do several things. One, a tariff will be a tax that's passed on to the consumer. Right? That's what's going to happen, because if a producer in China has to pay 20% more on a good, what are they going to do? They are not just going to pay it. They're going to pass it on to us, right? They're going to pass it directly on to consumer. And you don't have to just believe me for it. You can just go back to 2018 when Trump posed his 25% tariff on steel. And you know what happened with that? And look this all up. We ended up paying $380 billion with a B in taxes to the consumer. And is it ironic, or is it just a coincidence that during that time, prices for, cars and houses, things that use a lot of steel, went up dramatically? right? So we have contemporary evidence of how all this works, you know what I'm saying, with tariffs. But yet he's posing this, right? So we're going to get a 20% thing posed onto us. But that doesn't even note half of it, because what is going to happen with China? That country is going to probably impose tariffs on us because they're going to retaliate, right? So that means that if you're a business owner here, they're probably going to levy a 20% taxes on their stuff too, just to try and balance it out, because that's what countries do. So just as a very, very short, brief explanation, the two things that Trump has posed that he wants to do about immigration and tariffs will actually result in customers paying more for everything immediately. It's literally the opposite of what people say that they want. So, I mean, you don't tolerate Trump for, maybe you are not for his bigotry and everything like that, but you claim to like be there for like what he wants in policy. But let me tell you, that policy, if you actually think it out, is more detrimental to you. If everyone's talking about, oh, the price of everything is too high, his two things will probably raise the price of everything that you need even more. Like, and don't trust me, look at economists. Look at what tariffs do. Look at the immediate impact of removing the cheap labor sources in America will do. Don't just listen to what somebody says. They are trying to make you make an emotional, hate-filled decision. Like to say, ooh, immigrants, oh, crime, whatever. But is it worth it to you? Even if you believe all the quote-unquote negatives about immigration, is it worth it? That I guarantee you, with those things, you'll be paying at least 30% more for everything. Everything. So just think about that, food for thought, and please vote. Until next time.